Well, yeah, Gabe, today's podcast, we're going to be talking to Trevor Bronson from Intellex. He's the director of portfolio strategy. So we're going to learn about what that means. And we're going to learn a little bit about Intellex and about his career journey. And and then he's got some great advice on how to position technology implementations for success within your organization.
Yeah, I think this was a really neat interview just to hear from Trevor and hear how he got into this profession and was able to leverage it along with another field, which is in technology and in software, and maybe even had some tips and tricks for people that want to either move into that type of field with their EHS background, or even for those that want to try and recruit the best of the best from EHS and using the technology platforms and tools to be part of their hiring strategy. So really great information and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it was was interesting because a lot of people got into safety accidentally,
Right.
and Trevor got into it rather intentionally, but
Yes.
then he got into the technology side accidentally. So
Right.
we all accidentally end up where we're at. So
That's somewhere. Nice.
yeah, great. Well, let's get this session going.
Awesome.
My name's Scott Cuthbert. I'm CEO, co-founder of Safeopedia.
And I'm Gabe Encarnacion, VP of BBL Safety.
Guess
My
maybe
name
one.
is,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. Go ahead, Trevor.
Is it me? Maybe it's you guys. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just going to say we're super excited to have Trevor Bronson from Intellex today. He's the director of portfolio strategy, and I'll let him introduce himself in a second. And we're going to talk a little bit about his career journey. I know we always get a lot of questions about what opportunities are there out there for safety folks to expand their career horizons. So definitely want to talk a little bit about your career journey today, Trevor, and then. Another question that we get quite often is how do I get executive buy-in or management buy-in, employee buy-in, for safety projects, technology initiatives, and those sorts of things. And obviously, you've got tremendous amount of experience in that area, so we'll definitely want to be picking your brain on any insights or kind of ideas, suggestions you've got for our audience. So maybe I'll turn it over. Sorry, cut you off earlier, but I'll turn it over, let you do a quick introduction.
No worries. In hindsight, I should have seen that coming. It made no sense with the flow, did it? But nonetheless, here I am now. Yeah, my name is Trevor Bronson. I'm a director of portfolio strategy at Intellex. We're an EHS software company, been around for 30 years, covering basically the entire EHS space. Before I jump into everything, I want to give you, Scott, and you, Gabe, a big thank you for having me on the podcast today. Really excited to talk to you both, and specifically to talk to this career journey question, because it's something I am happy that I've gone on it, and really happy about where it's brought me. But something that was totally unintentional and nothing I ever planned for. It was really, really happy accident. Um, I started out in college not knowing what I wanted to do, actually. In fact, the college I went to, Rochester Institute of Technology, I went to specifically because it was an engineering school, and I decently liked math and, generally liked science, and was pretty good at them at high school, and thought I'd probably wanted to do something with them, but wasn't sure what. And RIT offered a program called University Studies, which was more or less the ability to take a bunch of different classes with no specific major, but like directionally take classes and see what you liked. And then after that year or so, pick an actual major and invest all your time in that. So I did that. And for a year, I took a variety of different engineering type courses and all kinds of things. But nothing really spoke to me or made me feel like I should spend all this money and 4 years of my life and plan my future for this path specifically. I was talking to my advisor, and I said maybe I wanted to do something in engineering with something more in the realm of sustainability or green energy or something like that. They kind of tied that in the engineering background, but something maybe forward thinking and moral, if you will, or something that was a little different, and something I was excited about. So he turned me on to this major they had called Environment, Health, Safety, and Sustainability bachelor's program. And I thought, okay, that's great. Let me try out a couple courses in that. And I did, and I really liked it. Now, unbeknownst to me, maybe at the outset of picking this, it was more heavy environment, health, and safety, EHS, than it was sustainability. But again, happy accident. I liked it and I wanted to stick with it. So I opted to make that my major. Over the course of the program, took all the common kind of EHS classes one would take. And one thing RIT did is mandated that you had to do internships, or there was a different, we called them co-ops there, but you had to have at least a year of work experience as part of your program. And I did, and I went to two different EHS practitioner jobs. One was more environmentally focused. I worked in an environmental management department, and the other was more of an EHS generalist. Those two roles really got my feet wet with managing EHS at the practitioner level, right? I combined those work experiences, were about a year and a half total, actually. So I overdid it kind of in the sense of I didn't have to have that much, but my first one was lucky enough that they wanted to keep me on a part-time basis after I went back to school. So I still ended up putting in about 20 hours a week remote for them, remote before everyone did remote, from the cafe. It was really nice, actually. So I didn't have to go get a different random part-time job at the mall or something, right? I could still stay in my field and get this experience while being back at college. So that taught me a lot about what it was to be an environment, health, and safety practitioner. And then after I left school, I did what everyone does and applies to all the jobs they can. Basically, you take your resume and you spray and pray, see who likes you. And I sent it out to a bunch of different companies, and the two companies I got the most traction with was this analyst firm called Verdantix that covers the EHS space, which I really didn't know about, but the job description more or less matched what I wanted to do. So I sent them a resume. And there was also another company who I don't remember the name of at this point, but a semiconductor manufacturing facility out in the Bay Area. One of the jobs I had as an internship with Tesla, so I was really familiar with the Bay Area. I had family out there, and I, to be honest with you, really wanted to go back and live there full time because I liked the weather, I liked the mountains, I liked the beach, I liked the sunshine. It was a very desirable place to be, still is. But Verdantix is the one that got me that offer and everything first. And I said, okay, well, let's go take this job and see what happens. You're young, you're just gonna do what you can and get your feet wet and go that way. Went to Verdantix and I became introduced to this whole software side of the business. I was more or less completely unaware that this universe within EHS existed before I took that job. We didn't touch on software much or anything really during my college curriculum. I didn't use software that much during my practitioner roles at the two previous companies, a little bit here and there, but nothing major. And maybe I just wasn't involved with it as some of the other full-time people. I'm not sure. But it just wasn't something I thought of. I never considered it as a career path. I did not go to school for that major thinking I'm going to end up in, or even affiliated with at all, tech. But what Verdantix did is they offered me the opportunity to really understand this market, to understand the commercial side of delivering solutions to EHS professionals. I want to emphasize it wasn't just software they covered, but it was certainly doing research to help EHS people make better decisions, use the tools that were available to ultimately improve outcomes. So by way of working there, I got to know all the major software companies, the major service providers. I really got to think about what trends were impacting the EHS market. And like I said, ultimately, how can EHS people do their jobs better? The reason I was probably hired to do that job in the first place wasn't because I was a good writer, which the job was a lot of. I liked writing, but again, I majored in EHS. It wasn't because I was coming from some other analyst firm where I knew how analyst firms worked. It was simply because I knew EHS and I knew what the role entailed and I knew what they had to do. And that enabled me to kind of understand then what is going to impact these people moving forward, what tools make the most sense, what are the actual pain points that are worth solving, and all of that. So I spent just under 4 years there. And during that time, it was awesome. It was a really, really good place for someone like me to go. In hindsight, again, lucked into it, but it turned out to be amazing. I made all these great connections. I learned all this about this whole world of technology, about what software can do, about what EHS people are thinking about. And I left that role to go back to the world of a practitioner. I actually had an offer from a company called Benjamin Moore. They make paint. And in the world of EHS, I would just consider that a chemicals company. Just so happens that the chemicals end up as paint after they're all combined in such a way. And to be an EHS kind of systems admin, if you will. So I did a lot of their work in software, and helped get the most out of the software they already were using, roll out new software, and generally just help the EHS program kind of optimize itself, right? That's the whole point of software, is to make things more efficient, quicker, to get to insights faster so that you can ultimately make better decisions. I emphasize this. I used to, I still do, and I will in the future. Software is nothing but a tool for a job. It is a hammer and a belt. It is the nail to hang the painting. It's not the end all. It is a means to an end. So I went there to kind of leverage their technology to better the EHS performance. But I realized when I went there, even though I was working with technology, I missed being a little closer to the technology side of the whole thing. I treasured what I knew about being a practitioner, but I realized maybe the technology space is actually where I was meant to be. So I reached out to my network that I built in my previous job at Verdantix and said, hey, I think this is the space I'd like to be. Lucky enough, a lot of the senior people kind of get to know you when you're in that role. And after some back and forth over a couple of months, was offered a job at Intelex to come help them with kind of their market analysis and understanding, and ultimately helping them build a better solution. And that's where I've been for almost 4 years now. Maybe 5, 4, feels like forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the story of my last 10 years on Earth.
Yeah, that's an interesting, like I think you said when we were chatting earlier, it's certainly unexpected journey that you followed. Maybe just for the benefit of the listeners, just maybe explain what Verdantix is, or what they do. You touched on it, but I do think they kind of occupy a unique space.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're an independent analyst firm that covers a number of spaces, but one of the bigger spaces they cover is environment, health, and safety broadly. So the goal of Verdantix is much like that of Gartner or Forrester, or if any of the listeners are familiar with that. It's to produce research on the tools available, the management strategies, the market trends, things EHS folks should know to, again, help them do a better job, ultimately, if I have to say it succinctly. I went there again because of my understanding of EHS, but when you're at Verdantix, you're writing reports, you're doing competitive assessments. Sometimes we would get an RFP from a company looking for a software, and they would say, hey, Verdantix, you know all of this. We have relationships with these vendors. You kind of really know what they do, what they don't do. Can you help us make the best choice now that you have our goals in front of you? So we would do projects like that. We would kind of forecast the size of the EHS software market, which was obviously relevant to the companies themselves or any investors or anything that wanted to play in this market. And all of this, again, I want to stress to anyone listening that thinks like, wow, that's odd. I did not go because I was good at forecasting markets. I did not go because I knew all of this stuff or how to do this. I went there because I knew this field pretty well, coming out of school, having done a couple jobs, and I could take that, the most foundational element of doing a good job, and learn all this other stuff on the fly. And that's what I did. And I totally lucked into that. That was not my plan, again, to go to a company like that, to learn things like that. Just turns out I really liked it. It married this really niche thing we do in EHS, right? There's not a ton of programs out there in the colleges across the US or otherwise that have a major in environmental health and safety. I think there are a little more now than there were, but there's still not a ton. It's not something really people think about or know about. Loosely, someone might know what OSHA or the EPA is, but people aren't on a day-to-day worried about compliance with those regulations and knowing, how far a ladder has to be out from the base of the wall to make sure the angles are all right, or at what height you have to wear fall protection when you're working in the construction industry, or things like that. So to marry that real niche set of knowledge that was going to be useful for the track of being an EHS, coordinator, and then a manager, and then a senior manager, and a regional director, and ultimately a EHS vice president or something, I guess, is the common career track. That's what it was. That's what it's meant to do. It meant to push you on. I just ended up on this weird other path. I diverged a little bit and used all that knowledge to build myself out in a different direction. Which again, for me personally, I'm not saying this is what everyone wants to do. It just really ended up being something that made me excited to come to work.
That's pretty cool. I think that's one of the things that's so fascinating about this profession and this industry too, is that initially you look at it and it's just thinking, okay, well, it's just safety. But there's so many other facets to it that you can go into technology, you can look at PPE, you can look at training, all these different areas where you can actually take a pretty diverse skill set and apply it in this profession. So that's pretty amazing that you were able to go in that direction and see how the use of technology and even your analytical skills are actually valuable in the EHS space, and then even with software involved as well too. One of the things that I wanted to kind of touch on, which you brought up, and I've seen this happen way too many times, is that you mentioned about how software is the end all for some people. They see it as just like, oh, this is going to solve all of our problems, when in reality it's just it's a tool, as you said. It's the hammer, it's the nail. And so many tech projects have been oversold to EHS professionals, and then they just fall by the wayside because nobody really knows how to use them, or whether you're using the right tool, or do you even know how to swing that hammer, kind of thing. So, I mean, what are some of the common mistakes that you have seen, even as a practitioner from the EHS side, that causes some of these tech platforms and tech solutions to just fail?
Yeah, that's such a good call out, Gabe. If you go into this thinking, hey, we're going to go buy software and everything's just going to be great, nothing to it. That is the only thing you're guaranteeing, is that it will not go great. You will fall on your face. It will look very bad for you. And I don't know what's going to happen, but you're going to create a lot more work for yourself. That's the one thing that will for sure come out of that approach.
Right.
So yeah, you have to, it might be easier to answer this question from a what should you do almost, because the inverse is obviously what should you not do if you want a successful project. You need to understand first and foremost what your goals for this are. Why do you have this hammer and nail? Because you want to hang a painting. That's what you're trying to do. So you need to think about it with the outcome in mind. You also need to assess kind of where you're starting from. Okay, what do I have now? Am I replacing a bunch of other software systems with a software that does more things like Intellex? Am I going from just Excel, and we use Google Docs and Word and stuff, and now I want a digital tool to kind of centralize my documentation? Am I starting from a group of workers that's very tech literate and knows how to use software and can really make the most of this? Or is this going to be these people's first time walking around wherever they're walking around with an iPad or something and doing things like this? To go back to that first one, right? Thinking about goals. Once the software implementation reaches a certain time frame, let's say a year out from implementation, or 2 years, or 6 months, 6 weeks, it can really be anything. In theory, there should be some sort of overarching goal or metric KPI you set for yourself. And then there should be small little building blocks towards that, right? Like crumbs, where you can look at and check your performance against what you think your performance should be on whatever metric you deem is important to you. Maybe it's, we want to lower our incident rate by 70%, in 3 years. So to get there, you obviously have to do little increments and hope it's coming down. But maybe it's not that. Maybe it's more of an adoption thing. Hey, I want 50% of my employees in my software tool every day. And to do that, I need to make sure people are actually engaging with this stuff, and leveraging it and getting value out of it, and not using it once, then putting it back on the shelf because they hate it. So you need to check your progress towards those KPIs as you go, to make sure that if something is going wrong, you can course correct. Strategy is not set in stone. I work strategy now at Intellex. That's like something I didn't really touch on, even what I do at Intellex. I'll get back to that. But strategy is not set in stone. A strategy is simply an approach to achieve a goal. And if that approach is not working, and in this case, the goal being rolling out software, you need to make, hopefully little changes. Hopefully it's not a huge change. Sometimes, I suppose. But you just need to make sure you have a clear understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. Is it going to be the foundation for the entire EHS management system? Is it just an incident management tool? Maybe it's all about environmental reporting. Understand what you're trying to do. Then thinking about where you're starting from. I mentioned a couple examples, but it really is important to it helps you identify kind of the scope of work involved to get where you want to be. You want to know where you're going, you want to know where you are now, and you want to be able to really map out what everything looks like in the middle. Now, this is all jumping the gun a little bit. We've done this assuming you've picked a software and are ready to roll it out in the first place. There is a whole lot of things that have to come before you even get to that point where you've purchased a software. I don't know if that's the direction you'd like to take this or not. I'll throw back to you. I feel a bit rambling.
Yeah, well, I was going to jump in and say we touched on Verdantics a little bit. I think everybody knows Benjamin Moore. Maybe you can talk about your role at Intellex. if people aren't familiar with who Intellex is, maybe
Yeah,
touch on that as well.
absolutely. Absolutely. So Intellex is an EHS software company. Sometimes we use the acronym EHSQ because we also have quality software. So environment, health, safety, and quality software company. Recently, we also may tack on ESG to that, environment, social, and governance, because everyone likes to swing that acronym around these days. Which used to be sustainability, which also could be CSR, which could be the triple bottom line. It goes by many names, but nonetheless, Intellex, a software company, been around for 30 years, headquartered in Toronto, Canada. We have about 500 employees, and we have a broad suite of EHS software solutions, which really cover everything an EHS person would need: incidents, audits, inspections, observations, behavior-based safety, waste reporting, air emissions reporting, some quality items. The list goes on and on and on. But we try to provide a tool, remember, to the EHS professional to achieve their goals and achieve their desired outcomes. My role at Intellex is the Director of Portfolio Strategy, which really means I'm responsible for driving growth at Intellex, whether that be organically or inorganically. I have a little bit more of a focus on the inorganic side, to make our tool ultimately more valuable to the end user. So the reason I am able to do this job, and I've been here for 5 years now, is because of that knowledge of EHS as a function that I have from my degree and my 3 practitioner roles I've worked, married with my knowledge of the market and the players and the competitive dynamics in the space and this landscape of technologies and solutions that exist that I obtained during my time at Verdantix. I take those 2 things and combine them basically into one brain and go to Intellex, and I'm able to kind of think about, hey, this is what the tool should really be if we want to make it the most valuable, the most useful, just the best thing since sliced bread to these EHS professionals. And I need to understand how to do that in the context of operating in a competitive world like enterprise software, right? Software as a whole is a super competitive, fast-moving, dynamic space to operate in. So it's really cool to take that knowledge, this niche EHS knowledge, plus go over to an exciting software world and try to make essentially a better software company, one that provides more value, that does more things, that does them better than other software companies that may have the same goal in mind. So here at Intellex, I'm able to, help look for M&A targets, maybe strategic acquisitions we'd want to make to add on to our portfolio of solutions. Maybe it's identifying a partner to work with that I think could make the solution better. Recent example is a partnership we have with Protex AI. They're a computer vision company that basically uses software to go through existing CCTV cameras and identify anything really, but in the context of EHS non-conformances. So maybe a forklift came too close to a person, or maybe a person's walking around without PPE on, or a number of things. And you can automatically log those observations, right? And why does that create more value for the EHS professional? Because it makes the process of getting those behaviors of those events that you want to log and track and trend more seamless, quicker to report on. You can have more data, better data, and make better decisions with it. So identifying things like that is part of my role. And then broadly speaking, organic or inorganic or otherwise, just trying to make sure we're doing the right thing, putting the right messaging out there, positioning ourselves in the right way, making sure we hit the right notes for a given deal. Certain people, like I mentioned in the beginning of this call, would want a software consolidation. That's the actual project. That way they have one tool for occupational health, and another one for industrial hygiene, and another one for environment, and another one for safety. And then over in their Europe region, they have 4 more tools to cover all those things, and they'd really like to bring them all under one roof. The notes you have to sing to make those deals, the messaging for that may be very different than what you talk about when you're just rolling out an incident management tool for someone that's going from Excel. So making sure we position ourselves in the right way to help that EHS professional understand that they're going to get value from this tool and going to be happy with the project when it's all said and done. So it's a really neat role. It really allows me to leverage everything I've learned, which I feel like is so rare, right? I have so many friends and people I know that maybe have gone to school and do something completely unrelated to their degree, or maybe have a job they don't really like, or just do something where they feel like, I'm not really using this. Maybe I'll use a little bit of this. I'm very fortunate to have it all be meaningful and leverage every single day to be at my job. So it's a really cool gig. Highly recommend it to anyone that wants to follow in these footsteps. It's a pretty neat path, at least for me. Maybe I'm nerding out over here, but I really like it.
No, that's cool, and love to see the passion. That's what it's all about. So maybe, and kind of looping back then to your earlier kind of train of thought around the procurement process, or the selection process. And keeping in mind that majority of of our listeners, I think, or subscribers at Safeopedia are small, medium-sized organizations, so they may not be as sophisticated or have as many folks involved. But if you're thinking, hey, like I gotta lose the spreadsheets, I gotta lose the
You should be thinking that. Anyone listening, think that.
Yeah,
Right.
So what's next, right? Like, because I envision, again, I have some experience in the software industry, and I've seen it firsthand. The director of health and safety for an organization, meets with the salesperson, gets a bit of a demo, they're all excited. They run into the board meeting or the senior management meeting, and they're like, hey, let's go spend 5 figures, 6 figures, whatever it is. And this software is really going to make everybody's life a lot easier. And then, they get the somber looks around the table about having to spend money, and they start asking some questions about maybe return on investment or total cost of ownership, or how much, what's the resources required, all those sorts of things. And all of a sudden the enthusiasm is deflated out of that balloon, and the director has to go back to their office and figure out what to do next.
Yeah, it's really tricky. The EHS person is always going to be the champion of the project, right? They understand kind of the business value of this, but making that case to people that don't have that type of grasp on EHS is really tricky. It's traditionally thought of as a cost center. It's not something that creates value for an organization, or at least not in the obvious way people think about a better CNC machine creates value by reducing quality defects, or doesn't create value by helping you make more sales or something like that. It's a bit more nuanced than that. So when you're trying to make the case to people that may not understand why EHS software is needed, you can do a number of things, and it's situationally dependent, right? The answer to any hard question is it depends, but it really does depend on what you're going for and what you think you can do. So the first and most obvious way that people will think about is probably going to be traditional ROI, return on investment. How can I find a way to quantify the benefits of having EHS software, or having this software versus my current software, or having any software over spreadsheets? People always jump to that because for those high level people that may ultimately be signing the check, that 5-figure, 6-figure, 7 figures I've seen check for these type of projects, you want them to understand what they're getting for their money. So you can think about a couple of ways to do that. There are a handful of levers to pull. One of the obvious ones is time savings. This is especially relevant if you're coming, maybe you mentioned the small and medium-sized organizations that are listening to this. This one can be very useful if you don't have technology today, whether you're doing it in Excel or on like the Google Docs, like I said, or maybe you're walking around with a clipboard. Maybe you're using an abacus to do calculations. I'm not sure how you're doing it, but if you're going from not having technology to having technology, think about the time savings that you're going to have using a digital tool to aggregate things, analyze things, not have to duplicate reporting. You don't have to go write it in the field and then come back and put it in the computer. You're not sitting there trying to format a weird Excel sheet and sending it all around to a bunch of different stakeholders to follow the workflow you've set out for managing an incident, from reporting the incident to solidifying the details, to doing the investigation, to conducting the root cause analysis, to assigning your corrective and preventive actions, to following up on those corrective and preventive actions, to seeing if you actually reduce incidents and is this all trending down. If you don't have a tool, that process I just explained is months. It is months, and it is emails, and it is errors, and it is people on vacation, and someone left the bill, and now you haven't done anything. So to have a tool for that can save you so much time. Now, saving time doesn't inherently mean save money, but what it does is it frees up time to think more strategically, to do things that are actually going to improve your EHS program, which in my experience as an EHS practitioner, I felt like everyone I worked with, that's what we all wanted to do. We like to sit there and spend our time thinking about and implementing programs that would improve the overall EHS posture of your organization. But it feels like a lot of days are just spent putting out fires, sometimes literally. It's a checklist this, it's an inspection over here, it's a safety buy off there, it's the thing of the day that you're dealing with, it's walking around doing PPE stuff. You want to actually take a step back and be able to strategically manage EHS, not just tick the boxes every day to try to keep your head above water. So to save your time from this administration of EHS, to strategically managing EHS is really awesome. And the equation for that is simple, right? You figure out how long it's going to take to do something, figure out how much time you think that software is going to save you, put a value on that time, whether it be a wage of that employee, hourly wage, could be a salary, it doesn't matter. And think about the different wages too of people that are using software. The time savings for a floor worker may have a different salary range than the time savings for the actual EHS professional. So if you want to get specific about it, you can do it that way to kind of figure out the ROI of the time you're going to save having this tool. The other, and I'll pause after this one, but the other most obvious way to track ROI of these things is to just say, hey, we're having a lot of incidents, or pick any negative event, and it's really costing us. Incidents have direct cost and indirect costs to them. Could be compliance violations, so the fines that come with that. It can be loss of production, which is kind of an obvious one to check too if you have to shut down the line because you had a safety incident. But think about retraining someone after maybe someone gets hurt. Think about the lack of productivity that person is going to have as they go throughout their return to work program, where they're at first only kind of working at 30% capacity, then 60% capacity. Think about maybe legal fees on the tail end. Think about, especially in today's day and age, reputational damage that's going to come from a slew of incidents at your facility. There are so many costs to an incident. You can do your best to quantify those costs. Now, some companies will know them outright. They know what an incident really costs them when it comes to workers' compensation insurance, what it really costs to loss of production. Or you can use a proxy. There are plenty of really good resources out there to give you an estimated number of what an incident really costs a company. I know National Safety Council has a really nice webpage on this. So you can do that and kind of use it to figure out if we reduce incidents by 50%, maybe that's the goal. What does that look like money savings? And that one, honestly, is probably maybe a little more compelling to those execs because look, for EHS performance is costing us $1 million a year. The software is going to cost us $100,000 a year, and it's going to reduce our spend on incidents by $500,000 a year. Congrats, you're making money. That one's really, really easy to understand.
So that's what's interesting about this to me too, is that since you've got your background in EHS and as a practitioner, are you looking at the software and software solutions in such a way where it's almost like you're figuring out your wish list as an EHS professional? Maybe you would go in there and understanding what you were looking for as someone that was maybe on the floor or had to use the equipment, or use the software. And you're able to bring a very unique perspective, which is that maybe at the executive level, people are looking at the software and doing that same math that you just did on the ROI. But we all know it never works out exactly that cleanly. And especially when you give it to the hands of the people that are supposed to implement the software or supposed to train people on it, it gets really muddy really fast. And I think that's where a lot of our listeners' frustrations can come in, which is that maybe the executive management has gotten this pitch. They have this software. They think it's going to solve everything. And then they never really involve the EHS professional in the actual discussion. So what are the ways where you as a practitioner of it have come in and brought your perspective to be able to either translate for the executive management or back to the other EHS professionals that are part of the companies? What are the things that you're bringing in based on your background that you can help people to succeed in implementing some new technology in their workplace?
Yeah, you have to as an EHS professional be really plugged in. You're obviously the champion of the project in the beginning, but it's again getting that ball to getting the software purchased and deciding we're going to roll this out. You're at the 50-yard line. We talked about football before we pressed the record button here, so we'll use some football analogies. You're the 50-yard line. There's a lot of work to do. So you need to make sure that project goes off without a hitch. You as that EHS professional know exactly how this is supposed to be used. How do I say this in the correct way? Doing that ROI analysis I just talked about is trying to get the buy-in from people that don't necessarily understand the actual value of this on the day-to-day. You're just trying to give them something that makes sense in their language. And that's super important for getting buy-in. You need to speak the language of the stakeholder you're speaking to. But when it comes back to implementing the software and really getting the value out of it, now that's your wheelhouse, right? That's what it's going to look like when the audit program is really singing. What it's going to look like when the incident management program is just going exactly how you always envisioned it to go and you're actually reducing risk. So you want to make sure that you are talking to the people that you're asking to use the software, right? An EHS professional may be the person at the desktop thinking, looking at the data and understanding what to do with that data in front of them. But they may not, that's probably not the same person that's on their phone or on a tablet at the line you're asking to do an observations. That's just, Suzanne down there that you're asking to keep an eye on things and then log an unsafe behavior if they see it. So
Right.
think about the usability of the software on their end. If they're having any problems, be very on top of it, be over available. You want to, I've seen so many implementations go wrong because it at first seems like it's more of a hurdle to getting the job done than something that's actually helping. You roll it out and you get the feeling that you've introduced an extra thing into the day in the face of what is surely an already tight production quota, in the face of they don't have extra time. They weren't just sitting around waiting to use the software. Like, that's not what they need. What they need is something that makes the job easier. So you need to make sure that that software you're using is optimized for the user, like the real user that's ultimately going to put that data in to allow you as the EHS person to make those better decisions. So make sure to keep them in mind when you're making the software decision in the first place. UX, UI is something that's always super, super, super important to any software that even we all use as consumers. And the case is exactly the same, if not a little more over-indexed for EHS software, because sometimes a lot of the people that are using this may not be people that are super, super familiar with a piece of software. They can't just pick up an iPad and kind of intuitively know how these things work. They may need a little more training. So make sure whatever software you're choosing is built with that in mind, the awareness of that problem. And then as you implement, I mentioned it in the earlier, but course correct, what you're actually trying to achieve. You need to have actual numbers or something you can lean back on to say, is this working? Are we getting more data? Are our risks going down? Are our incidents trending down? Are people trained more? Are we seeing less near misses? Anything. You could sit here and rattle off them for the rest of the call. But make sure you're keeping a really close eye on that, especially in the beginning of the project. And if you really want to go crazy and be the real MVP of this, think about all those things, but not just from the EHS department side, right? You're the EHS person. That probably means you have a pretty tight relationship with operations. You probably have a decent, maybe, relationship with people in the supply chain that you're thinking about their safety. Make sure you're thinking about them as the stakeholders too. Is this helping you? Less incidents equals more uptime, should equal better performance on the engineering operations side of things. Think about how you can make it so everyone is singing the same notes. That this software is not just seen as this random tool that the EHS department used. This is really part of the company operating more safely, obviously, but more efficiently, in a better way that makes the stakeholders in the company happy, the shareholders happy, that makes ultimately the employees happy and safe and valued and all of that. There's just a lot to think about, but I think it really comes down to know who your stakeholders are, understand their concerns, see this project from their point of view in the beginning and in the middle and in the end. And if you do all those things, you'll probably end up with a pretty decent project that ends up how you want it to end up. And if it's not going how you wanted it to go, you'll have visibility into that way before it's too late, because there's plenty of times where I've seen it be too late.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I mean, you touched on something I think I'd like to loop back on, obviously, and dig into a little bit, because I think that's like you talked about the frontline person having to learn, a new tool and maybe collect more data than they collected in the past, right? So I think that you talked about making sure you know what your objectives are and why you're doing this and what you want to accomplish. And I think it's important, for the safety practitioner or whoever's, part of that steering committee for an implementation, to recognize that you might require more resources in some areas than you have in the past to get it up and running. So rather than expecting people to do it off the side of their desk, have additional resources available to kind of get it up and running. Because I think an important fact, at least my experience, that some people don't recognize is that it might be making big improvements for the organization at a high level, more visibility, more data, more predictability in operations, but it might be making somebody's job a little more difficult than it was in the past, right? Like bringing bringing new technology in as an example doesn't mean that it'll magically make everybody's role easier. And I think it's important to understand that. And then when those complaints are raised, rightfully so, hey, I'm doing more work than I used to. It's yes, and this is why you're doing more work than you used to, and this is what we're going to do to support you going forward. So I don't know if you can.
I think one big thing I always recommend in this situation, right? If you're introducing someone that just there's no way around it, you want to make it as seamless as you can. So you want to make something be 3 clicks instead of 17 clicks, and you want to make sure it works every time. Maybe it's instead of having to download the checklist before you go out on the floor, put a QR code on the machine and scan it when you get there, and make it easy to use first and foremost. But that is, in a sense, obvious. If you're going to ask people to do something, they want to be rewarded for doing it. They want to feel like I'm doing this for a purpose. So if I ask you to put in some observations and record this stuff, and if you see a board laying across the floor that's a trip, slip, fall hazard, take a picture of it. Or if you see someone mop and then put a wet floor sign up, take a picture of it. Or if you see a machine left unguarded, take a picture of it. You get maybe 5 pictures they'll take before they stop taking pictures if they don't see anything happen with that. If they just do this and send it out into the atmosphere, it's like yelling off a mountain and they don't see anything from it, they're going to stop doing it because you're asking them to take time out of the day to do something for what? For why? So you need to make sure there's a loop. There's a bi-directional kind of feedback loop here where if they're taking the time to participate and use this tool that you are putting out there to ultimately make them safer, right? The intent is noble, but you need to make sure they're seeing the benefits of this. So that could be in the form of gamifying this, and tracking who submits what and making sure there's visibility into how much you're using the system and get people engaged that way. It could be thank yous, like literal thank yous as you walk the floor. Hey, I saw you submitted this. I want to say I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. I want you to let you know that we fixed that issue. We solved for that problem, that risk 2 hours later because of your thing. We wouldn't have seen that otherwise. And now it's a safer place for you to work. And everyone wants to work in a safe place. Make sure that they're seeing the value out of their usage. I keep them engaged because if they're doing things and they never see, if they take a picture of that cord and it doesn't move for 3 days, they will not take a picture of the cord the next time, so that you have to be on top of it. That's really maybe the biggest thing when it comes to a successful implementation, relying on other people to be part of this project for you. The EHS people get it. The other people don't. You need to make them get it, make them see the value.
I think especially early on, I mean, you mentioned it too, there's that learning curve. And so when people are using a new piece of software or even a new training, a new method of doing something, having that come into play, it is going to feel like it's a hindrance to them because it's new. It takes some time for that muscle memory to kick in. And a great way to do that, as you said, is to be even be able to say, this is why this is important to do this. For someone who's maybe on the production floor, to be able to say, okay, well, we're going to reduce our incidents by X number because then we'll get more contracts for the company. Okay, that's maybe not their priority. That's not what's going to float their boat. But to understand that, hey, by using this, we're actually able to fix these issues faster, which will make work better for you as you're doing it. Then, okay, now you're tapping into something that is meaningful and valuable for them. So I like that concept of being able to translate the benefits based on who the stakeholder is at that point, whether it's the CEO, the EHS professional, or the worker on the production floor. They all have their own motivations, their own desires of what to do with it, and not saying that the software is the be all end all. It's merely a tool, but for people to see, here's how the tool is actually going to help you, and get you accomplishing that thing that you want.
Right.
I think that's a huge challenge to be able to translate that, but the benefits of it are massive.
Huge, absolutely huge. And you brought up a really good point there, Gabe, too, that when you're asking someone to do something, right? We let me frame this differently. We talk a lot about safety culture, as does anyone in the safety space.
Right.
You go to an event, there's going to be a couple of speeches on safety culture. You go to Intelex's website, you'll see us talking about safety culture. You go to anywhere in the safety world, safety culture will come up at one point or another. It's not if, it's when. And that's important because safety culture really can drive an organization to achieve that level of safety excellence they surely want. And safety culture is important because you need them to make the safe choices, right? When no one's watching, when it doesn't matter, when there's some other goal in mind. You that's the holy grail of safety, is making sure that everyone does their job, whatever their job may be, thinking about how can I make sure I do this in a way that prioritizes safety over, so like maybe a speed of production or something. I'm rushing to hit a quota, so I'm going to take a risk, and I fell off a ladder and I broke my leg. Well, it wasn't worth it, was it? You want to make sure you make those decisions. So that's important to keep in mind in the context of rolling out software or anything, or anything, just EHS management in general, because the person that you're asking to make that safe decision, the first person they're going to think of when they're making any decision at work is their boss. Is
Right.
Who do they report to? Who are they trying to please, if you will, or who's responsible for their annual review, right? The EHS VP could come out there and talk about safety culture all they want. That's great. And hopefully it strikes a chord, and that's awesome. They understand why safety culture is important and kind of how to make it happen. The CEO and the senior execs can come out and talk about safety and how it's such a big deal to our organization, and we really put safety first. And here's a t-shirt, and on the back it says safety first. And aren't we great? We are just the best company that really thinks about safety. But in that moment, when there is a real decision to be made, when someone is about to maybe rush or do something they shouldn't, or say, you know what, I don't need safety glasses for this because I got to get it done before I go home, they're going to be thinking of their boss first. They're not going to think of the EHS VP. They're not going to think of the CEO. They're going to think of, what is my boss going to think about this? Will they think I'm making the right decision? So if you really want safety culture to exist throughout the organization, you need to make sure that that person's boss, and then that person's boss's boss, and then you see where this is going, are always going to reward those people for making the safe choice. That is the way that you actually implement an entire safety culture. When it comes to software, especially being part of that, make sure that you have that kind of chain of command with people saying, here's why you should use this, here's why it matters. Really excited to make this part of how the company operates for the ultimate betterment of the workplace. So I think, I don't know, that's something that I think is really important, maybe sometimes overlooked. Everyone knows it has to come from everywhere, but not everyone stops to think about what that actually means in that one moment. All it takes is one mistake. Everyone knows this one moment, one fall off the ladder, one crutched by, one whatever, one moment. So in that one moment, who are they thinking about and what decision are they going to make?
I was wondering if we can loop back to career a little bit for a second. I know we're getting close to the end here, but I think you have an interesting perspective, your journey that you shared. So maybe, just quickly, just two things, maybe you could touch on kind of the trends you're seeing, right? So I think there's probably a lot of folks out in, again, small, medium-sized organizations still using manual processes or spreadsheets. Are they the only ones still doing it? Is there 80% of small, medium-sized organizations still manual, looking to technology? And then, so that's question number one. And then question number two is the the career advancement or career opportunities. We've talked, I think, even back when you were speaking at Safety Connect in 2020, we talked a little bit about technology itself is not replacing safety professionals, but safety professionals who understand how to leverage and bring technology to an organization will replace, safety folks who don't. So,
Yeah.
So if we could talk a little bit about those maybe macro trends that you're seeing, and then, any experience you have with seeing people, people embracing, the implementation being that MVP within their organization, and what kind of opportunities or doors that opens for them as far as career advancement goes.
Yeah, those are two really important points. The second one especially. So I'll lead into that with the first one. At medium and small organizations, penetration, it's going to vary, but let's peg it to like 45% or so. And it's hard because in the world of EHS, you can use software at one plant or in one region and not use it at another. Or you can use software to do one part of EHS. Maybe you use it for incident management, but you're not using any software to actually do your root cause analysis, or you're not using it to do your waste reporting or something like that. So saying you're penetrated or not when it comes to EHS software is a tricky thing to discern. And trust me, as a person that's responsible for strategy at a software company, I spend a lot of my time thinking about how to assess the penetration of software at companies we like to sell our software into. It's a real pain, but you have to think about it like that. So to put maybe some organizations at ease that may think they're missing the boat or something, there are so many companies still doing this the old-fashioned way. And some of them, honestly, I've seen have made it work okay. If you're really good at that, Excel and Google Sheets and whatever, and maybe you had IT builds you a homegrown system or something. If you really pay attention to it, I'm not going to sit here and say you can't do it well. I'm not saying people that are using that are in the Stone Ages. They're not. You can make it work. You'll inevitably hit a ceiling, though. There is just certain things where it will get too difficult to do. You will hopefully want to grow beyond that, and you'll need some sort of tool that's a little more dedicated to that. So you need to think about that. Now, this is not only a thing for small and medium-sized organizations. Overall, yes, the penetration is absolutely less for those types of organizations. They are going to be more likely to be using pen and paper, which when I say pen and paper, I often don't literally mean pen and paper, just not commercial software, because it can be expensive. Sometimes it is literal pen and paper, but oftentimes not. It can be expensive. It can be a pain. You have other things you need to focus on first. What limited budget you have is going to those projects that are more obviously going to help the company. If I, the EHS person, say, hey, I need $200,000 for software, and the engineering team again says, hey, I need $200,000 for a new asset that's going to make us produce this widget 3x cheaper and 2x faster. Guess who's getting that $200,000? You know,
Exactly.
so you need to really understand that it's a common problem that a lot of companies face, but it's not just SMBs. Big organizations, we've probably all learned this over the course of our careers. Things are rarely as buttoned up as they seem once you get to the inside. So there are plenty of big names, household names, that you would think they must really have just the best of the best. They're also using pen and paper. They're also kind of doing this held together by duct tape and bubble gum sometimes. They're all trying to make their way out there. So no one should ever feel like they're behind when it comes to using technology. But to get to the second part of your question, Scott, it's a huge opportunity to really nail these projects. You, as an EHS, this is one thing I like to do when I'm thinking about how to provide more value as a software vendor or someone who works there. Obviously, I have perspective from working in EHS, but I always like to just pull up a bunch of EHS job descriptions, VP to director to associate to intern, you name it. What is on that description? This is your job responsibility. What are those 10 bullets? What are they asking? So when you're trying to execute on those things, which is usually some combination of make sure the safety program is, overarching and covers everyone, make sure you're improving on our key metrics, whatever those metrics may be, make sure everyone is trained accordingly, make sure that you work, closely with the various teams in the company. You want to do those things better, insert the tool for the job, right? And that's where software can help you ultimately be a better professional and excel in your career. You can try to achieve those same outcomes with Excel, pen and paper, whatever, but to have a dedicated tool is going to make you achieve those goals better. Now, this is something I've talked at a couple of events about recently, but the onset of ESG is something that's taking this to a bit of a new level, the visibility and the career trajectory for the EHS professional. EHS, like we mentioned earlier, and this is common knowledge, right? The cost center thing. It's just not the sexiest place that you can possibly work in an organization, maybe, or the people that's not what they think about when they're trying to bring talent up through the organization. I do think that pendulum is swinging a little bit, but it's a slow pendulum. Okay, it's swinging through like a field of molasses, but it's getting there. ESG is bringing this really cool, interesting opportunity because ESG is something that really gets talked about at the highest levels of an organization. They're talking about it in the boardroom. They're talking about it on calls with analyst firms. Your CEO is going on CNBC and talking about it. Everyone is thinking about this, but when it actually comes to tactically managing ESG, what goes into these ESG reports? A lot of stuff, first of all, an insane amount of stuff. But a lot of that stuff is EHS related. In fact, it's a lot of the metrics that these EHS professionals have been thinking about on a day-to-day basis for a long time. And a lot of these safety professionals specifically have been thinking about for a long time, whether it be how are we treating our people, how are we making sure safety is a thing that we think about in our supply chain? What are these actual metrics? If you look at the big ESG regulation coming out of Europe, CSRD, put in by the EU, which is going to be rolled out here in 2025 for the 24 reporting year, I think. There are sections in that mandatory report that just asks you for your safety metrics. Someone will tell you CSRD is all ESG reporting. I'll tell you there are questions that are just traditional old incident reporting in that, and that you can expand that. There's a lot of things like that. So because this has so much visibility, you go back to company level, who's managing this? A lot of it's going to be the EHS person that's tasked with this. But now the metrics that you're pulling and the reason that you're pulling them take on this new meaning, this new value of something that drives not just kind of sort of value, kind of have to make the case value, let me figure out how to, make these numbers work value. real value to the organization, whether it be in stock price or talent or competitiveness or all this stuff. So because you as the EHS person are now responsible for managing that, you have a bigger seat at the table, or maybe a seat at the bigger table, depending on your organization. It depends on the culture there. You have this ability to have so much more visibility into what you're doing and the importance of it, that it is such an opportunity for the EHS profession in general and their careers. They can go a whole new direction with things. They'll be able to be more seen. More resources will be allocated to them, which should drive better performance, which should drive more resources, which should drive better performance. On and on we go. There's it's just really exciting, because the occupation has not had many kind of paradigm shifting moments like that where it truly shifts. Some new technologies come in, a new reg might come out. Maybe your company goes through a digital transformation or something, but this is something that's really expanding the role. And it's not just me coming on here and saying this because Intellect has software for all this stuff, right? That's the easy. I've talked to so many EHS professionals that talk about my role literally got an extra S tacked onto it. It used to be VP of EHS. Now it's VP EHS and S, because my company's asking me to do this stuff. My department just got split into something else. And now not only do I manage the environmental team and the safety team, I also have to manage the sustainability reporting team. This is really happening. And it's really neat. Honestly, it's really, really cool that it's happening right now, that we get to be a part of it. And I'm excited from the vendor side of things. EHS practitioners should be excited. Everyone should be excited.
So, what's really neat about this too is that, as you said, I think you mentioned this early on in our discussion, which was that there are more and more people coming out of school with EHS backgrounds, whereas in the past people kind of just stumbled into it, and guess what? You had like an incident or something like that, and you're now the safety professional that's in our company.
So it happens so many times, doesn't it? People, what is my background? I'm a chemical engineer. I work security. I did, I don't know what. I was with the front desk person, but now I manage the safety program.
Exactly.
It happens all the time. Who's gonna do this?
You get to do it now.
Yeah.
But what's kind of neat about this too is that now you have people that are coming out of school or jumping into this career specifically because of EHS and because of that EHS background, and they have more of these tools available. Now, I think as people are getting into the profession at this stage, they are going to be more used to having technology be part of
100%.
the place where they are working. So do you see that as even a draw for recruiting for organizations, that if they have an EHS program that is a little bit more built out, that they have technology tools in place, is that more attractive for EHS professionals that are coming in, and essentially for organizations, they will get higher quality, better, more knowledgeable people coming in because they have some of these tools in place?
1,000%, 1,000,000%. No one at the core of it, whether it be EHS or anything, no one wants to go to a job where you're kind of set up to fail or going to have a tough go of it, right? You want to go to a job where you feel like, hey, I can really go in and make an impact. And software is one of those ways where you can drive an outsized impact on what you're doing. So you as a company, you want to attract people. This is actually a good talent attractiveness like mechanism for any person that's coming into the company, because they want to know you're taking care of them. But for EHS people specifically, the subject of this conversation, you want to go somewhere which is using the best of the best, which has the most fun toys to play with, which has the shiny bells and whistles that you can really use to do your job well. Like you said, people coming out of school right now expect technology. They expect to have a tool for this. If they come into a role where you're doing this with Excel, they will roll their eyes, they'll groan, and they'll do the job for a little bit and probably either leave and go somewhere else that has technology or force you to get it. So, you can, I guess, wait or get it now or lose the person and keep doing this. It's something that allows these professionals, these up and coming EHS professionals, to do their job well, to be thinking strategically. Everyone, I guarantee, always wants to think more high level at their job. It can allow them to do that. And you want ultimately the people at your company that are eager and excited, enthusiastic, not just to fill out reports all day, but to think about what can make that EHS program better. Give them that time, use software to do it. And you'll have better talent at the end of the day. These EHS people will want to stay at your company more. They'll do a good job for you. It's a win-win.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I definitely couldn't agree more. If you want the top talent, you don't have to have the AI robots running around in the factory just yet, but you need something for them to really jump into and get a hold of and feel like they're using their 4-year degree, not just following a checklist on a pad of paper or an Excel spreadsheet, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I was listening to a podcast actually, I think it was Freakonomics or something. They're talking about AI and everyone's talking about ChatGPT right now and all of that, and we're all thinking about it and will it take our jobs and all of this stuff. You need to think about, first of all, probably not. Second of all, but you need to think about technology in the way that, are you trying to get something to replace the person? Because if that's the ultimate goal you're trying to achieve, that's the goal you'll work towards, and that may be the goal that you end up with, the outcome you end up with. Or are you trying to roll out technology to help people do better? And that's what EHS technology is. It's not to replace anyone or displace the EHS professionals, to help the EHS professional be a better EHS professional. So I think that's really key when you're rolling out any kind of technology product or building one, in my case. Make them a better worker, make them able to do their best work. That's what we're in service of.
Yeah, and I think the earlier comment as well, if you are with that 50% or more of small, medium, and even maybe large organizations haven't yet adopted technology to its fullest, if you have that opportunity to get involved in a technology project, then you're going to be in high demand in the not too distant future when eventually these companies go to make those decisions. So if you're looking at career advancement opportunities or just how to change things up, definitely follow Trevor's advice on talking to the stakeholders, getting that buy-in, making sure you have a super solid plan on what you want to accomplish and following that plan and circling back on it. And if you have a successful software implementation, then you will definitely be the MVP, and many other companies will want to grab a hold of you for sure.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your time, Trevor. It's always a huge pleasure talking to you. You talked a little bit about your journey. This is totally off topic, but I remember when we started Safeopedia, and we were like, "Oh, wouldn't that be amazing if we had Intellex as a customer?" And so, when you talked about your journey, it just made me think about ours. And so, it's such a great honor to have you here today and to have Intellex on the podcast and as a strategic partner of Safeopedia. So thanks for everything you guys do.
The pleasure has been all mine. This past hour doesn't even feel like work. This feels like I took a little break, got to have a fun conversation, and then I have to get back to my day job here. So
Nice.
No, I really appreciate the time from you guys. I love coming on here. I love the partnership, and I love talking about this stuff and hopefully helping everyone listen to it be a better EHS professional, right, and do a better job and have better outcomes. So thank you again for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah. Sorry, Gabe, to jump in. I was just going to say we'll share out your contact details so people can maybe hit you up on LinkedIn. I'm sure lots of people have questions about, okay, well, that sounded good, but how do I do it in practice?
Sure.
But also, and I'm going to volunteer you a little bit as well. Like, I know you're super busy, but you're very generous, and very knowledgeable. And I would encourage people, if they're contemplating a career change or thinking about getting more into the technology space, that sending Trevor a note on LinkedIn. I'm sure he would be gracious enough to reply and help out and give his advice. So
I would love for people that have EHS practitioner experience, that have a background in the role to come over and join us at Intellex. We can never have enough people that not only are excited about technology, but really know who that technology is for. That is for any tech, especially EHS, though, this niche world. That's how you make the software better, by really knowing how the end users are going to use it and what actually creates value, what a real good software tool means. So yeah, if you want to do that, message me. I will help you out as much as I can.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Gabe. Really appreciate it.